Hi everybody, I'm Trish Christ. NECAT and our super crew of teenagers are here today with the Frist Center for the Visual Arts. Executive Director and CEO Susan Edwards is going to tell us all about the cool things they do in our community.
Well, welcome. Let's go inside. We'll talk more.
Let's do.
It's our Nashville.
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 We all know how to talk about our organization during meetings, but what about the chance encounter of a lifetime? You never know who may share your next elevator, notice your logo on a notebook or a tote bag, and ask what you do. What's the clearest, most persuasive thing you can say in a short elevator ride?
I think to say it's Nashville's Art Museum is, a very short sentence. I mean, truly a soundbite. And if I have time to say that we are non-collecting and we present the art of the world, and every time you come, it's worth a visit because it's going to be different. And you can see everything from antiquities to yesterday, and there are ways to learn and enjoy and grow in your own appreciation of art.
We have so much to talk about. The magnitude of work that you all do at the Frist is enormous, and so I'm going to try and take us in baby steps so we can talk about as much as possible. Let's start with purpose. What's the purpose of the Frist Center for the Visual Arts?
Well, we were founded to provide art for everyone in this community, access to the entire world, and I think even more than just exposure, that opportunity to learn from art and have those transformative experiences. We hope that by bringing the world to this community that perhaps we can broaden horizons, help people understand that the world is very complex, but we're all part of it together. So I think it's a bigger mission than seeing and about the pleasure, visual pleasure. Yeah.
Tell me about the first museum experience you recall having.
So after I had gone to college, I had a kind of different experience with art. And I was living in New York City then, and I for some reason have always been completely fascinated by abstract art, which seems, not the normal gateway. Many people like something more realistic that they think, makes sense to them. But I was always drawn to things like Jackson Pollock's Autumn Rhythms. And it was one of those paintings that I could look at for long, long periods of time. And looking at something like Guernica, Picasso's response to war, was something that it had, a kind of visual weight, but then it had a kind of sociological weight. Something that brought me in and made me think, why is he doing this way, and what all is going on in there? So I always liked complex things. I love poetry because I love metaphor. I love things that aren't exactly what you're expecting. And many art historians go into it because maybe they wanted to be a detective, but it's filled with clues. And so there's this kind of trick going on all the time with art in that if you figure out those pathways, it's like solving a mystery. And if you like mysteries and you like something that isn't completely what you think it is, it reveals itself. And your interpretation is as good as anyone else's. And I think that's very empowering as a museum goer.
One of my favorite exhibits of recent years at the Frist was, forgive me, I can't think of his name at the moment, it was a photographer, and he did large-scale color photos of dumps and landfills.
Was it Vic Muniz? Or
It was at the same time as that, I believe.
And there was another artist named Bertinsky.
Bertinsky, that's who it was. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
A Canadian
Bertinsky.
artist. And those, sometimes they show the scars on our earth.
Exactly.
Of man's intrusion into nature. And that's a subject that goes way back in history. And we think about 17th century artists who were dealing with ruins and how the great monuments of man or mankind topple, and yet nature continues. And all of that, in many ways, it may draw our attention to our responsibility for our planet and for the environment, but it also reminds us of our own mortality. It reminds us of our own mortality. And that regardless of what monuments we build to ourselves or in the world, that our lives are finite.
And our mark behind us might not be finite.
Exactly.
That
Exactly.
Bertinsky photography was riveting to me, and I did find it beautiful, even though it was photos of things that
Shipyards and oil
that
fields.
hurt us,
and,
you know.
industrial waste and industrial scars on the planet, which are really pretty brutal. Toxic
Brutal
waste
is a great way,
sites.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But presented in a very aesthetic way too, so that one of the things that happens when an artist is political and in a very subversive way, that we're seduced by the beauty and then repulsed by at the same time, and that tension of emotions really gives it something that stays with us.
That's exactly my experience with that, yes. So a lot of people toss around art versus craft. I would love to hear your thoughts on, is there a difference? And for you, what is the difference in making art versus making a craft?
I think those boundaries are more porous than they're often seen by others. I think that hierarchies just don't work in the world of creativity.
Nice.
But I think that to some extent it has to do with intention, and it has to do with context, and it has to do with how other mediating forces can put that forth in the world. I think particularly of an example, it was an exhibition we did in the past of G's Bend quilts. I mean, clearly they were were put together for utility purposes, and they brought together in the most artful way, and then they were put in another context, in a museum context. We began to look at design, and that these artists or artisans really innately had a great sense of scale and perspective and color and pattern. And so I am less concerned about that boundary than what catches my eye. And so someone once asked in a meeting I was in, well, what does it take to be a curator? And someone answered, the job. And so, whose opinion matters to you. And if you're a creative person, which obviously you are, the joy of making it is generally sufficient. Not completely, people like to be recognized, but there's nothing wrong with being a craftsperson and doing something very, very well with your hands.
It's all expression. So how do you decide what experiences to give us?
Well, we are constantly balancing, and our ambition is for someone who lives here over a 5-year period to have seen the art of the world, all time periods, all cultures, all mediums.
Wow.
So you'll see something from antiquities, and then you'll see something that was created yesterday. You'll see something that one might think of as craft and another person might think of as fine art. We like to give that broad range so that people have tremendous amount of knowledge for seeing something new, because at some point your depth of knowledge gives you the tools to be able to discern. And I would like to think that we're helping people make better aesthetic decisions, and sometimes bringing the world a little closer and demystifying cultures that we may never have the opportunity to visit ourselves, but we need to know about. We live in a very small world, and so we try to balance not just our budget, but also all of the art of the world, so that people who never leave this region have the same opportunities as those people who have the opportunity to leave and see a bigger world.
So imagine someone's watching us right now, talking about the Frist and art and so forth, and that person thinks, you know, I never really got art, but maybe I'll go to the Frist. What tools or sort of welcoming mechanism, because being a welcoming place is very important to you, I know, how does that person get embraced or left alone to experience an exhibit?
Well, there are many ways to come in. First, the Frist Center offers many things besides just the visual art that's in the galleries. And there are a lot of events, including music. Frist Friday's always popular every summer, but there's live music on Thursday and Friday evenings. And for events, there'll be music, there are architectural tours. There are many different ways of coming in, and maybe for that first time, maybe someone just goes in the shop and buys something sort of beautiful. We're all comfortable shopping. The Frist Center is one of the architectural gems of the city. We're certainly finding that as Nashville grows and changes, that people are taking a greater appreciation of something that's been here since 1934, and it really is quite a beautiful building.
It is.
So you don't really need to know very much about walking in, and there's spaces and galleries that are always free, and we vary free days so that if admission is a barrier, that someone can come in for the first time. Everyone under 18 is always free, so we certainly want all the children in the community to come, and one adult can bring all the kids they can get and together to get there. We were talking earlier about levels of interpretation, so you can look on the website before you come. You can learn a little bit, so you're more knowledgeable than you were prior to looking at the website. But also there are audio guides, there are text panels, there are lectures, there are films, there are things that are related to the art that you might not always think of, and they offer another way of seeing something and another level of engagement. People greet you when you first arrive, and I think hopefully very friendly throughout your visit. And a lot of people like to come with a friend the first time, and then it becomes kind of a habit. You were describing your experiences. You've never been intimidated by going to a museum, and no one should be. I mean, we were a 1934 post office, and retrofitting that building was sort of perfect because it's a democratic use. The percent is there for everyone, and we hope everyone feels welcome, and then they can increase their knowledge by listening to an audio guide, reading text panels, or just going through and just taking it in visually once and coming back for another level of engagement and another level of engagement and go back to the website after you visited and read again and grow in your knowledge and comfort.
I am Ann Henderson, and I am Director of Education and Outreach here at the Frist Center for the Visual Arts. So the Education Department is a pretty large department with a large responsibility. We want to reach all of our visitors and make them feel welcome, make them feel that they can learn something about the art, and so we do it in a number of different ways. We'll do it through school tours, adult tours, we'll do it with film series, lectures. We'll have conversations in the galleries with either curators or educators about works of art, just so you get a chance to explore it. But we also offer hands-on opportunities through workshops. So we'll do drop-in drawing, we'll do drawing with a model, and we have an educator here who will facilitate the experience. And for about an hour, she'll be in the studio with a still life that is set up and kind of help guide that drawing exercise. But you're also free to go throughout the building and sketch and be in the galleries and sketch and take our stools and sit down and spend some time, which is really fun. The other opportunity we have is our exhibitions change constantly. We're non-collecting, so that means we offer something to everyone. And if you just come back a couple of times throughout the year, you're going to see different parts of the world and different artwork, which is really exciting. But that also gives us opportunity to kind of adapt and change our education models and approaches. And so we may do, we've done glass blowing demonstrations when we've had glass exhibitions here. We'll do created a sand mandala with our Buddhist exhibition, where we brought in monks from Tibet and created the sand mandala over 5 days. Really, the exhibitions help us be really creative in terms of what we can offer visitors. And it's all ages. It's from artful tales, when we offer it to 3 and up, to 103 if you would like to come. We know that visitors learn in many different ways, and some like to read, some like to listen. And so we do offer both the written word through our wall text and gallery guides, but we also offer audio guides. And so we produce those, write them ourselves, hire local actors to read them, and we record them. Even if you're not able to make it to the Frist Center, you have access to the resources and the ideas and the creativity that art can inspire you.
It's another of my favorite exhibits at the Frist. It might have been at the opening. It was early on for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There were portraits on all 4 walls, portraits about that size, and 2 of the walls were drawings from, I think, an assisted living facility of senior citizens who had been paired up to sketch each other. And the other 2 walls were from a pre-K daycare kind of center where the children had been paired up to draw each other. And it would say, they looked remarkably similar. And the names in the seniors category were Mamie and Wilma and Madge and things like that. And in the children's category were Caitlin and Jenny. And
It's a generational
it was
shift.
a completely generational shift, but their drawings were all really, rudimentary, and everybody had big smiles. I mean, it was a very moving recap of sort of the span of life.
Of a lifetime. Well, and I think that there was a book by Betty Edwards titled Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain about our creative centers, and that we actually are all born extremely creative. Sometimes we are just because it's necessary. Sometimes we have to get on with things and leave that behind. But that's one of the great things we see in exhibiting work by children so often, is that they have such a spontaneous sense of their own ability, and they're not intimidated by it all. And maybe we circle back to that later. We also find that very often in people who are incarcerated are given art projects. Wow. And it's one of the most healing things for people to do. So I guess my point of that is maybe we should never let go of that childlike innocence, because it will serve us well all of our lives.
People can have that experience to a small extent, I think, if they come to the center, because you have the room with the interactive learn to make things. Tell us about that.
The Martin Art Quest is designed for intergenerational, interactive learning center. And so there are different stations where you can paint or create a print or do drawing or even animation, different ways of approaching art. So it teaches all the elements of design. And there are always art educators in that room. So whether you're a toddler or a senior, and you can go in and someone can help you learn something different. There's a table with a lot of blocks, and we change out the blocks periodically to sort of have some relationship to some of the exhibitions. Sometimes we find 40-year-olds pushing the 2-year-olds out of the way to get to the blocks. But
maybe not the intention.
We didn't know that was going to happen, but everyone loves to build, so it's great fun. And it also reminds us that art can be a lot of fun as well.
The Frist Center is a public art museum, and we want everyone to feel welcome. And then our programs that we offered to make them accessible to everyone was very important as well. We want to provide opportunities for scholars who are really in-depth experts about maybe Renaissance art history, that they can come and we'll offer symposiums oftentimes, so that's a really deep dive into that scholarship. We'll offer programs such as Beer and Art that kind of look at, we did it during Watch Me Move, which was about cartoons and the history of animation, and so taking some cartoons and matching that with some beer and having a great time. So we do offer it highbrow, lowbrow, something really that appeals to everyone. We reach the little bitties through Martin Art Quest, but we also want Martin Art Quest to be for everyone. And we do find that teenagers go in there and use the building blocks just as much as the toddlers do. So they're pretty creative, and it's an opportunity to experiment and to build. And whether you know it or not, you're experimenting with architecture, and you're thinking about how things come together in spatial relationships. So that's the other connection we can make with our programs.
What distinguishes Nashville and our Frist Center from other cities of relative size and their museums and their art experiences?
Well, Nashville has the benefit of having been a little bit late to the game. Because we didn't have a major collecting institution here. I remind you, there's a lot of art in this city in different institutions around Nashville. But when the Frist came, we had the opportunity, instead of having a single collection that people came back over and over, that we could bring this great diversity of art, and that we could go for the best in the world that we could get for Nashville. And if we had a collection, or if we'd even started a collection in the 21st century, we may not have come up with some of the things that you've seen, or we couldn't afford to have them and keep them in the same way that we can share them on a extended period but not a permanent period. And so if one comes regularly, you have all the advantages of a larger museum city, a city with different and diverse collections. So I think that the average museum visit isn't 8 hours. It's more limited. And so if you can do the Frist or half of the Frist in your afternoon that you're going to give to looking at art, or your 20 minutes that you're going to give looking at art, you can come back, but it's very manageable and it's very diverse.
Early on, I know you guys sort of resisted the word museum, and now I don't feel that sort of resistance anymore. Tell me about the difference in a museum versus a center, and what sort of change might have happened in the spirit of staff.
I think that's what the word branding is all about. Well, no matter what you call yourself, you're what your public thinks of you. And I think the original idea was that center might be more inviting to people who hadn't had a museum. That museum might be an intimidating word, but we find, especially as people think of what a museum offers, and many people move here from parts of the world and this country who have lived with art museums, and so that's it's just rebranded itself while we were doing other things. And it's more direct to think of it as an art museum. And I think the other thing that changed about that is when we think of our trusted institutions in this country, which is unfortunate, some of those that we should be trusting the most have, for a variety of reasons, ceased to have the integrity that the public wants from them. Art museums have risen in the estimation of the general public as a place they can count on for integrity, that they know that there's dependable knowledge there. Probably because we're not connected to the commercial world. Our reason for showing something is not a bottom line reason. Our reason is for public service. And so I think art museums earn the integrity, and I think people feel very welcome there. And museums have gone out of their way in the 21st century to be sure that they are not elitist and that they are constantly thinking about being available to the broadest range of constituents and making it accessible both financially and in terms of engagement and welcoming.
So this is one final segment. We call it the speed round.
Okay.
And it's like the game we played when we were kids, where I ask you a question, and literally the first idea that comes into your mind, just let it fly, and we'll go on to the next one.
Okay.
Fair enough? Okay. All right, here we go. Speed round with Susan Edwards. Complete the phrase, art is.
My joy.
See? If you could chat with any artist, living or dead, who would it be?
Sol LeWitt.
Who is it?
Sol LeWitt.
I don't know that artist.
I'm broadening your horizons.
You are.
Great.
See, you can't help it. And what would you say to him?
I miss you.
Oh, honey. Oh, my goodness. Why should people return to look at the same exhibit more than once?
Because you will always see something different.
What are 3 reasons to go to an art museum?
For solace, for growth, and for pleasure.
Name 3 cultures whose art the Frist has shown.
South Asian, American, and European.
What is the one word you most want people to associate with the Frist?
Mine.
And last of all, what's your website?
fristcenter.org.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
It's our Nashville.